Good to be here. Well done to Steve, Dave, Chris and all the guys. What a convention. Tom has used his special old-timers power. Somehow he's never heard me share, but he stole my story. Especially that bit about the toilet. You know, I really enjoyed Tom. Well done. Yeah, what a pitch. And he's right up my alley as well. I've been called a big book thumper. It has no effect on me whatsoever. The big book saved my life. It is the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have no idea what I'm going to say. My wife is here, so there's one thing for sure. I have to tell the truth. And the truth is that I can be the best person in the world and the worst person in the world all in the same day. That's the truth. And my sobriety date is November 1st, 2009. And it's not a... It's not a hell of a long time in calendar terms, but it's a long time when you're 37 years of age, I can tell you that. I've grown up in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I went to my first meeting on April 19, 2006, and I got sober, like I said, on the 1st of November 2009. I had my first drink when I was 10 and my last when I was 21. I just want to qualify myself before I talk about the recovery portion or the recovery journey. And I grew up in an alcoholic home in Ireland, which is, it's not an uncommon thing. Drinking in Ireland is not a convivial pastime, it is a ritualistic alternative to real life. A spiritual placebo. And my father was an alcoholic, and for the first 8 years of my life he didn't drink, but he didn't go to meetings. And he's what's known in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous as a dry drunk. And then he drank in 97, and initially it was a sense of relief in the house, and then it turned really bad really quick. And my dad was a violent drunk, and my mother was trying to keep up appearances and fix everything, and we all know what that does to the household. You know, it's not the reason I'm alcoholic, right? But it definitely impacted how I viewed the world and dealt with the human race. That's one thing for sure. And as a child, I was always thinking about my thinking, worried, you know. And then in the winter of 98, somebody handed me a little bottle about the size of this one. It was a little shoulder, and there was poitín in it. And anybody who doesn't know what poitín is, for our international friends, they use it to rub it on the muscles of racehorses when the racehorses are injured. So I took 3 mouthfuls of this stuff at 10 years of age, and it hit my toes, and the entire face of the universe changed. And I became obsessed with that feeling from that first drink. I couldn't get that out of my head at 10 years of age. And I genuinely believe, all I have to do is take a couple of mouthfuls of this stuff for the rest of my life and I'll be fine. Now that's not normal thinking. So that's the obsession of the mind straight away. People say, there's a line, Tom, you said you were born. I don't know where this line is, but I was drunk when I crossed it. I know that for a fact. And I don't identify with anybody who says they drank socially for any period of time. I came straight out of a cannon, crazy. And, you know, at 10 years of age, I wasn't going to get to drink alcoholically, but I was obsessed. I couldn't think straight. Sports took a hit, school took a hit, everything took a hit. I was just obsessed. All I wanted to do was be old enough to get to the pub and drink. And, you know, I remember experiencing the phenomenon of craving then when I was about 12. There was a load of cheap German beer, room temperature beer, cans of beer that were up in the shed. And I found it, and we started off like a gang of us, you know, drinking 1 can. Then it went to 2 cans, then it went to 3 cans. And this, over the space of 2 weeks, like 85 cans of beer disappeared. And then we got caught. So straight away I came up with this plan. Oh, we brought it up the field and we spilt it out because we didn't want Daddy going back drinking. And the worst possible thing happened to me in the moment. I got away with it. And I realised, oh, I can just lie and I'll be fine. Because we brought my mother to the scene of the crime. And we said, look, here's your 85 cans of German beer. We just spilt them out. Yeah, we spilt them down our necks. So, and then when I left school at 14, and that's when my alcoholism really took off. And look, I have non-conference approved chemicals are part of my story as well, but we have a singleness of purpose in AA, and there are other places to talk about that stuff. But they were a huge help to me getting sober young. They really battered and fried my head. And look, there's a lot of people in the room would have similar experiences as well. But the booze was the only constant, you know. The booze was always there. And I remember leaving school at 14, and for the benefit of my Scottish friends, my parents packed me up and sent me to a beautiful little fishing village called Coatbridge at 14 years of age to try and sober me up. Now, anybody who knows Coatbridge, that's not a good idea. Coatbridge is known as Little Ireland. It's the 33rd county. Let's just say it didn't work out, you know. I haven't enough time to talk about that, but that's the craziness, you know. Look, I can talk all night here about car crashes and fighting and falling in and out of love and school, and a lot of my friends took their own life as well. There was a lot of suicide in the area in the early noughties in Ireland, and look, we were teenagers at the height of a well-established rave scene as well, which was a beautiful thing to be part of. But I'm going to illustrate, for the benefit of those who are new, the mental obsession and the physical allergy in my experience. Because it's not, I know people who are not alcoholic who crash cars and fight and fall in and out of love, but they don't have the mental obsession and the physical allergy as described in our book of experience. They just simply don't have it. And I have a couple of stories that will illustrate what it looks like. And usually I would wake up on a Monday morning and I would say, that's it, I'm done, I'm finished, I'm never drinking again. And I'd set about this quest never to drink again, believing that I had some kind of involvement in the decision-making process. And the first thing that would happen would be, like if you hooked me up to a lie detector test on a Monday morning and said, here kid, are you going to drink again? I'm 16 years of age, I'm saying, no, I'm done, I'm finished, I'm busted, I'm battered, I'm not doing it again, I'm a blackout drinker. Sleepwalking with activities, Robin Williams called it. That's what I was, a blackout drinker. I would say, no, I'm finished, and I would pass that test, no problem. The lie detector thing, however it works, would say, yeah, you're in the green, kid. The first thing that would happen would be, without chemicals, I would find life completely unmanageable and absolutely unbearable. The second thing that would happen would be the people closest to me, I was a living nightmare, because I knew you'd love me no matter what I'd done or said. And then the people on the street, I was a saint, because I was afraid that you'd find out what was really going on in my own head. And I was tormented, by the way. I didn't know if I was gay, straight, man, woman, child or beast. I didn't know what was going on in my head. Full of resentment, full of anxiety, full of fear, paranoid. A fella said in a meeting one time, I never forgot, he said, I was so paranoid, I thought the people in front of me were following me. And it was savage, right? It was savage. And then by Thursday, the mental obsession that is described in the first few chapters of our book would start to take a hold. And some days it's like a cavity block on my head. Some days it's like walking around with a 50 kg dumbbell sitting on the back of my neck, do you know? Or a medicine ball, you know, it's like carrying it. And it's sometimes like, we have to drink, we're going to drink, we need to drink, we're going to drink, who's going to drink, where is the drink, how much drink, how much money have we got? And it's vroom, vroom, vroom. And other days, it's like a gentle breeze, where you're walking down the street, the book says not a cloud in the horizon, and my brain goes, a pint of cider would be nice. So whatever manifestation the obsession would take, it would usually go like this. Hey, maybe it wasn't that bad. And maybe if you just drink cold, cleared spirits and don't drink coloured spirits, because there must be something in the whiskey that drives you insane. But if you just drink gin and vodka because it's clear, you know, and don't mix it with Coca-Cola because there's too much sugar. Or maybe if you just drank bottles and don't drink pints. And eventually my brain would clap on to some insane trivial excuse to take the first drink. In the light of the havoc that my drinking causes, there is nothing on this planet that could justify a drink. Nothing. Because of the chaos, right? And my brain would go, do you know what we'll do? we'll drink 6 pints of Guinness and we'll go home. And I would say, well, that's a fantastic idea. Why didn't I think about this on Tuesday? And then I would make a decision. And again, right, if you grabbed the same lie detector test that was calibrated on the same day, and you hooked it up to me and you said, here, are you just going to drink 6 pints of Guinness and go home? I would say yes, and I would pass it. Because I believed I had some kind of involvement in this thing that was going on in between my ears, this obsession of the mind. And I'd walk in, I would set up all these, like, you know, I'll just bring €50 and I won't do this and I won't do that and I won't go here and I won't ring her and I won't ring him and I won't go to this house party and I won't go to that house party. And I might change my phone number, I might leave my keys at home because I don't drink drive. And all this stuff. And I'd walk into, as soon as I would put my hand on the door of the bar, I would just feel, be like this instant relaxation. I'd order a pint of Guinness. Now, those of you who are Irish, or not Irish, you know that drinking a pint of Guinness is a spiritual practice. You don't just pick it up and gulp it down. It must settle to a certain type of ruby blackness. You cannot just, you can't abuse the pint of Guinness. So I'd be sitting at this bar and there'd be a load of old timers and the fire would be lit and Peggy Gordon would be playing in the background. When I'm drinking, I'm always thinking. And the process would take about a minute and a half. But what would happen to me is the demand for this substance would become so great that I would look the barman in the eye and say, give me a whiskey while that pint is settling. I would take one sup of this whiskey and 4 days later I wake up in a crack den 6 counties away in the same underpants and nobody talking to me. And I would come to with no money and I would say, how did that happen? And I would set about this quest again and again and on it would go. So much so that at the tender age of 18, I was 12-stepped and brought to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous after going crazy in the family home. And I was introduced to AA, and that year was a bit of a funny year. I was, yearning to get away, if that makes sense, I applied for the British Army, the French Foreign Legion, the Irish Army, and I joined Alcoholics Anonymous in the same year, and if none of that worked, I was heading for San Francisco. Thankfully, two positive things. I got into the Irish Army, and I'm still in it today. I have 19 years of service, and I stayed in AA. I didn't get sober straight away, but I stayed in Alcoholics Anonymous. So that was a positive thing in the summer of 06, April 06, spring of 06. And but the problem was, when I went to my first meeting, 2 men from a group not too far from where I was offered to 12-step me. The problem was that meeting was that meeting with those people. Everybody knows, don't go to that meeting with those people. They study the big book. Don't go there. And out of loyalty to those 2 people, I stayed away because I didn't understand. You know what I mean? I didn't understand how to feel. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous for a half an hour here. And I'm thinking, I thought this gig was about unity. Why are they telling me to stay away from those guys and come here? Anyway, I know now why, but anyway, it was crazy, and I set about sponsoring myself for 3.5 years. And I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. Because I still had that obsession of the mind and the allergy of the body that it talks about, and the alcoholic craziness and the head and neurosis and all this kind of stuff. And I wasn't treating the causes and conditions. And those 3.5 years were pure hell. Pure hell. I drank the Tradition 7 once. I went on a holiday when I was told not to go on a holiday. And I was 4.5 months sober. I got off the plane, I got to the hotel, I looked across the road from the hotel, there was an Irish bar and there was a billboard outside it. It was in Portugal and there was a wee poster of a bottle of beer, and my brain said to me, Jesus, Noel, in all the years you were drinking, you've never had Portuguese beer. And I lay drunk on the holiday for 7 days. And that's not the habit of drinking, folks, that's the obsession of the mind that the book describes. So we'll fast forward. I did get sober in November 1st, 2009, and I'll explain how I got sober. I was standing in a nightclub in the town I grew up in. It was 20 to 11 on the 1st of November 2009. Ironically enough, the same time the Titanic hit the iceberg. I put down my last drink. It was a Captain Morgan and Coke, and I turned left and I walked out the door of the nightclub. 101,000 times before that I turned right and walked up and ordered another drink. So why in that moment did I turn left and walk out? I'll tell you why. Because every prayer that was ever said for me and every candle that was ever lit by my grandmother and my mother was answered in that moment. And I was gripped by the grace of God. And I have not needed or wanted a drink since that moment. I stayed sober for about 5 months and I went insane again. The cheese slipped off the cracker. And I was sitting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and I wanted to blow my brains out. And I couldn't because in the military they took my rifle off me because I was a danger to society. So I was combat ineffective, really. I was a soldier without a rifle because I was, I was on the brink of losing my job. I was facing 12 months in prison for something I did in a blackout. And my life, I was sleeping on my mother's couch, and I was driving a car that was 20 years old, and my life was destroyed. And I remember going to a meeting on a Sunday night, and there was a man there. He talked about the message, the big book, and he went to that meeting with those people. Yeah. And I believe this is another moment where God intervened, but I asked that man to be my sponsor, and he fired me through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and my life changed, completely changed. I got an understanding of what was wrong with me. I got an opportunity to do a 4th and 5th. I got to make amends. I got a God in my life. I lived in 10, 11 and 12, and my entire 16 years of sobriety have been a series of breakdowns and breakthroughs. That's all. But the main thing is that I didn't yield. With regards to studying the book, reading the book, studying the history. The history of Alcoholics Anonymous will teach you not what to think, it will teach you how to think. If you're, I'm a history buff, I love it. And, everything went well in my sobriety up until a few years ago. I experienced a thing called the dark night of the soul, where if you're in a few years and you feel a bit stale and you don't know what's wrong with you and you're wondering why the shower you had 10 years ago isn't keeping you clean and your head's kind of all over the place and the resentments are creeping in and I'll fast forward. The man who 12-stepped me into my first meeting was my father. My father went back out drinking after 14 years, and just over a year ago we buried him because he drank himself to death. He couldn't afford to pay for the last pint he drank. He was in the local pub in the village he grew up in, and he couldn't afford to pay for the last pint he drank. And that's the savagery of this disease. I will remain teachable in every aspect of Alcoholics Anonymous except for step 1. I will remain absolutely belligerently unmoved in step 1. To drink is to die. And I feel that in my heart today. And I have had wonderful people help me down through the years. There's people here at this convention, Martin F. from Clonmel. What a legend, When I was young and dumb and I didn't know which end of me was up, them boys took me in and they taught me about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they had patience, love, kindness, tolerance and all the things that goes with it. Davy B, my first sponsor, an absolute legend, took me into his house when no one would talk to me. I was a few years sober when I met Paddy the Fish, if anyone knows him. Myself and Paddy are like a married couple, and he can't be here this weekend, he's at sea. He's a great guy, he's a huge guy, and he helped me an awful lot in the last 12 months when I went through that thing called the dark night of the soul. So I suppose I'll conclude my story because, about a year ago, I hit a wall in Alcoholics Anonymous where I believe I was in... Now, I know, look, it's easy to say this up here now, but I believe I was in day 29 of my final 30 days. I believe I probably would have killed myself or drank. I was full of resentment. I couldn't sit in the same room as my wife. I had no patience for my kids. I hated myself. And I was working 3 jobs. And I was running with 15 commitments in sports teams. I was trying to outrun my disease, 15 years sober. And I had forgot everything I had ever learned about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I felt disconnected from God, and Paddy, my friend Paddy the Fish, got a new sponsor. Anyone has ever come across Tim M from London? Tim is a very interesting character. And Tim started to sponsor Paddy. And first of all, I scoffed, of course. Tim, whatever, And, this new sponsor, he's great and all this. And Paddy was telling me, he has me doing this and look at this and look at this. Paddy was lit on fire with this stuff. And part of me was just dying inside. And I was too full of ego and pride. I'm an old timer, I'm a long time around, all this kind of nonsense, Till eventually I went on a meeting called Soul Earners one time. And there was a fella called Joe. And he was wearing a big cowboy hat. And the meeting was over, and when the meeting ended, he started to sing, "Drop kick me Jesus through the goalposts of life." And I said, this guy just has something, this breeze, freeness, And I rang that man, and I was in tears when I rang him. I said, I need help. I said, my head's gone, blah, 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 noise. And he sent me a step zero inventory. And, Clancy had given him this step zero inventory, right? Now, I'm about a day away from wanting to string myself up on a tree, right? And the first thing my mind goes, Clancy's a bollocks. I don't want to do anything Clancy does. Savage. The savagery of that. I'm about a day away from wanting to throw myself in a river, and my mind is telling me, not doing that. So eventually I just sat down and I done this step zero inventory. It's a series of questions, what things keep coming up from the past? What behaviour are you doing that you want to stop? I'll summarise it, right? I was rude to my wife, I was shouting at my kids, I was spending money I didn't have, I was trying to outrun my disease with sport commitments, I was working 3 jobs, I was doing doorman in nightclubs, spending hours in the nightclub, hanging around afterwards, eating chips, talking to the lads, didn't want to go home, just terrible, upside down, inside out. And I done this inventory, and I rang Joe, and Joe said to me, why are you doing these things? And of course I started giving him a litany of excuses. Well, my dad died, and I'm untreated, and I need a new sponsor, and blah, 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 noise. And Joe said to me, Noel, you're doing these things because you have no character and no integrity. You either stop doing them right now and become a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, or get yourself a new sponsor. Because I don't sponsor people who don't have character or integrity. And it was like, boom, I went silent. Now he's later told me, he goes, man, I was so happy there was an ocean between me and you when I saw that. So most people say to me, did that make you angry? No. Did that hurt you, your feelings and blah, blah, blah? And I said, no. It neutralized me and rocketed me into the 4th dimension of existence and put me back into the arms of the Lord. That's exactly what it done. Back into the arms of that higher power, the grace of God. And I just felt for the first time in a long time I was going to be okay. And he threw me through the steps again, 1 through to 9 in about 6 weeks. And I remember, it's something Tom said there as well, I remember I was working with one guy, right? This is how sick I was. I was working with one guy, and I was afraid to tell Joe that I had a sponsee, because I thought he was going to lecture me and tell me, you're too unwell now and you need to sack that man. He done the polar opposite. He said, 1 person. These are rookie numbers, man. You got to up these numbers. You got to get busy. You got to start helping people. And you know what? He was 100% right. Because in helping others, that's where the reward is. Page 128 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, giving rather than getting becomes the guiding principle. And that's the key. The more people I help in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, the more tolerant I am in the family home. The more I can be at perfect peace and ease. The more I don't have to control everything. When I'm not helping people, I'm left to my own devices, and I'm a nightmare. I'm an absolute nightmare to live with. I can say that out loud. But he's introduced me back into the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I have a new lease for life. And I'm telling you now, if you stand still for more than 20 seconds, I'm going to offer to help you. That's a fact. Because that's the key. That's the key to the secret. C.S. Lewis said that the gates of hell are locked from the inside. And in our book of experience, there's a beautiful story called Keys to the Kingdom. We have the keys to the kingdom in our pocket. And we're standing inside the gates of hell that are locked from the inside. It's insane. So look, I could talk all day, I really can. I love talking. So I got 5 minutes. 5 minutes to have a bit of crack. Shameless plug, folks. If you see this flyer, pick it up, scan the QR code, come to our Young People's Convention, please. In Ireland. There is no age limit. I suppose you can only get in if you're 99 and accompanied with both parents. But look, that's a shameless plug. And I love the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love the fact that my wife is able to be here with me. I love next year we're planning on maybe bringing the kids. And that's character, that's integrity. In the 7th step in the 12 and 12, it says we seek character over comfort. And that's what I do on a daily basis. When I have to make a decision today, it is done by this means. I turn to page 19, and the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says a much more important demonstration of these principles lies ahead in our respective homes, occupations and affairs. If a decision is to be made, I measure it off those 3 things. Am I affecting my home? Am I affecting my occupation, which I need to show up for, by the way? And am I affecting my affairs, as in my friendships with other people? And if I'm affecting those 3, I don't make the decision. Simple. But if I'm not affecting them, then I do it. So it's just reintroduced me to the basics. And look, like I said, 16 years ago, I couldn't carry my rifle in work. Today, I'm the youngest senior non-commissioned officer in the entire Irish Defence Force because of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Not because I'm some sort of exceptional soldier. It's because I care about my job and I participate because of the principles of AA. I will leave you with this. Paddy the Fish has asked me to share this poem. It's a poem about a pig. Am I allowed to say it? Am I? Okay. This was handed down to me by my grandfather, who was also 45 years sober, by the way. One evening in December, I was taking a stroll down the street in drunken pride. Well, my feet took an awful flutter, and I fell down in the gutter, and a pig came up and lay down by my side. Well, a passer-by was here to say, you can judge a man that boozes by the company he chooses. And the damn pig got up and walked away.